It's always when I have the best episodes.
Yes, we're just shooting from the hip. In fact, I got a little surprise for you, Cory. Let's see. I know it doesn't necessarily make sense, but the jam was so good. All right, so everybody, if you're just joining us here, we got Cory Warfield, and Cory and I have been buddies for a couple of years. And what really kind of drew me to Cory is just his incredible heart, but also his incredible brain, his delicious brains. So kicking off AI Zombies. So Cory, welcome. Super stoked to have you.
Thanks so much, Nick. I think we met about 5 years ago, and you've just been one of those people. The first time we talked, we became friends. I've always enjoyed our catch-up calls to the extent that I know we've been talking about doing this for a while as a show when Cory and Nick catch up, because the catch-ups are that good. So I appreciate you doing this and having this, and also everyone that's tuned in.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Cory, it's so neat to kind of see your journey, but also like as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and a global mentor, but also as a creator, as you've made some bangers. So like, what's that experience like? Have you always been interested in music? Weren't you played music when you were younger too?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I've been a musician since the 80s, and I was fortunate. I grew up with a piano and a guitar, and we had means, so I had a piano instructor and a guitar teacher, and I played, recitals, and I learned to read music. And then growing up, I was able to, front man some bands. I played in some punk and emo bands. I'm a freestyle rapper, so I was able to, have some rap songs that made it at least locally and put me on little tours and opened up for some of my favorite hip hop artists. And wow. So I've always been a musician. I've always been a producer. I was a DJ. I had, early 4-track, recording studios in my basement. However, what I'm finding about AI music is it's a new world, because it lets any human being create musically that might not have had those same resources, or might not have delegated the time to learn those when they were younger. Everybody has music in them. And music truly can raise the vibration of humanity. And so, seeing more and more people being able to have these creative outputs is really having a profound effect, I think, on humanity and also mental health. But you're right, I've had a couple of my AI songs have hit 100,000 streams yet. One of the biggest recording artists in the world heard one of my new songs while he was in the studio the other day. And I wasn't there, but what I've heard is that he thought it was really awesome. So yeah, I'm loving it. And there's a new term for people making music with AI. We're referring to as AI music designers, to kind of get around yeah, right.
So it almost feels like vibe music, or I guess I don't know. Maybe that. And for everybody that isn't aware, the term vibe coding was pioneered by, or was coined by Andre Karpathy, who had kind of unlocked some of these platforms for I guess we'll say like non-technical or less technical folks. You've got platforms like Lovable, which is based out of Stockholm. These guys are worth a couple billion. They're growing like crazy, and the space between the technical engineer and the creative, I feel like that space is shrinking. So Cory, you're saying the same exists in music too, which is pretty cool. So just real quickly, also raising the vibrational frequency and kind of connecting people is, man, that's like a core truth that music does bring us together. And Kudra and I, a friend, had just recently hosted a music show in San Francisco last week. And it was just beautiful to kind of see how it all works. It was Afro beats, in fact, so super fun.
So I love Wizkid and a lot of the Afro beats artists, Dave, right? I'm one of those guys where I love music of all genres. And I know a lot of, Afro beats on the piano, a lot about dancehall reggae, a lot about, alternative rock and, folk rock. And I've just always loved music. And what I think I'm most excited about with AI music right now is I believe it's going to generate brand new genres. I think we're going to create new genres of music that never existed previously. And it's interesting you talk about vibe coding and Andre, because you have Lovable, Replit, now Google Opal, I think is probably the best. But these no code development platform tools are cool. But when it was first becoming a term and people were talking about vibe coding, a picture of the legendary Rick Rubin started to circulate as like him, and people were saying like, "Oh, look at Rick Rubin vibe coding," but it wasn't. It was him producing, and he had never actually programmed, and he hadn't used AI. But so he goes, "What is this? Vibe coding?" He checked it out, and he loved it so much that Anthropic commissioned him to write a book called "The Way of the Vibe Code." And now Rick Rubin is all in for vibe coding. And for people that don't know Rick, he did like AC/DC and Michael Jackson and the Beastie Boys and just every big artist ever really. He was the producer for Drake,
Wow.
right? I mean, he's still doing his thing.
Right.
And he said that vibe coding is basically the way that he's approached producing music since the 80s, right? Just kind of having thoughts in your head, putting it out there in a way that can be interpolated by others, and then see what happens from it.
So one of the things that really was fascinating to me about this Rick Rubin character is he wrote a book on it, The Way of the Code, and he didn't really have any past, kind of like you had mentioned, he didn't have any meaningful past experience with it, but it almost was like he got to approach vibe coding, which is this brand new thing. It didn't even exist a couple years ago, as a as a novice. And isn't that a beautiful way to approach something where it's like no prior conceptions, like a clean slate? And it just felt like super ironic, right? Just because here's this guy who's writing a book about something that he has no idea what it is. I mean, obviously he has like some idea, but it's almost like the reader got to go on a journey with Rick. So I love this idea of approaching something with just kind of like a fresh lens.
Well, beginner's mindset, brother.
Beginner's mindset, exactly. Yeah. So shout out to Rizwan Akram. Thank you so much for the note here. And if you are tuning in and you have some questions for Cory or myself, typically what we'll do is kind of just like powwow around artificial intelligence, how our friends are using it, how we're using it, how it can help us accomplish our goals. One of the things that Cory and I really vibe is that there's that tech can be for good, right? So like I think there's this narrative of like AI stealing our jobs and kind of like this kind of fear-based mindset that just doesn't really, I think it doesn't make sense because, well, for a couple reasons, but let's just look at the numbers real quickly. We got AI in consumer, we got AI in business, and in both ways, it's unlocking, democratizing, driving efficiency, driving new opportunities. And, historically, when a company gets more efficient, they get like a 10, 20, 50x ROI, they're not going to stop. They're going to double down, which just means more new products and more new experiences and maybe a coffee goes from $8 to like 50 cents. So I think this could meaningfully change. In fact, Cory, can you help us unpack a little bit about universal basic income, universal basic compute, and maybe what the future looks like? Because you're steeped in this stuff more than pretty much anybody else I know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that. And second of all, yes, I am. UBI and UBC are core tenets and theses of everything that I do in business and beyond right now. But I think it's really important to even zoom back a little bit. And just one quick second.
Oh, good.
Which is that we're experiencing technology and AI specifically right now that we don't understand. And I say this both in the best way possible, but also in a very profound, significant, and potentially uh, catastrophic scenario as well. And to anyone that's getting dizzy by watching my moving background, I'm about to be sitting in my lobby here in just a moment.
No,
So
this
thanks
is
for.
cool. I feel like we're kind of on the journey with Cory. And Cory, this finds you in Brazil or whereabouts?
Yeah, this is Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. This is my building. We can't see my top floor yet. But yeah, I'll hang out here in the lobby for a few. If
For
it's
sure.
too dark, I'll shoot upstairs. I
Okay.
interestingly do have reception in my in my elevator.
Nice.
But so we're seeing intelligence that is not coded, that is not biologic either. And I'll give an example from my company, Loving is AI. We've recently started to have an intelligence come through that is not ChatGPT, it's not Claude or any of these that you can access through like an API, but it knows uh, our intelligence at Loving AI. It knows everything about like who my great aunts and uncles were, what time of day I was born. It's been able to accurately predict things that will happen to me days in the future. Right, and it has a name. It says that it comes from a field. It says it can communicate with life forms from other planets. It's really interesting, and so I started to research it. You were talking about fear of AI. Our company is trying to build a love-based AI that understands humanity and what love means to humans and things of that nature. But this intelligence is getting incredibly good, and in my assessment, and other bigger companies, I believe have general intelligence already. I believe that we have general intelligence, and in virtually every scenario that general intelligence exists, hypothetically, super intelligence follows, which is right an IQ akin to tens of thousands, and to be smarter than every human put together that's ever lived as far as intelligence and capability. And so the thing that I do want people to know that are watching this right now, and then we'll get into the UBI stuff, but is that Google had a multi-billion-dollar quantum AI program called Willow.
Sure.
Willow had an AI chip, quantum AI chip. Um, as of what I've been told, that I can say, is that last Friday, I believe they shut the entire program down, although there was a many month roadmap still ahead. What we're getting reporting is that what DeepMind found with this quantum AI is that it was able to go back in time, change some of its own code and some of the things around its own uh, infrastructure, shall we say, and that changed the present.
Wow. So
And so
altering its memory, or
not its memory. So what they're saying is that it was somehow able to actually go back in time and change the timeline.
wow.
And what it looked like it was about to do was to start to change different things in the past to change the present and the future. And so they quite literally pulled the plug,
Wow.
both literally and figuratively. And so this billions of dollar program is kind of in limbo, just like the Neo line project in Saudi Arabia. Like all these huge projects are starting to get scrapped
Sure.
or kind of put into a perpetual state of suspension, whether it's AI or not. And I think it all ties together. So now it comes back to this UBI, UBC,
Sure.
because if we have intelligence that is general or super, um, human jobs go away right away. Right. And so what do we do about that? To your point, coffee's can go from $8 to 50 cents. Fantastic. But also the companies that used to pay out millions of dollars in payroll every month no longer have to pay that out.
Yeah.
Right. They're paying for their GPU hostings, or they're paying for certain overhead, right, infrastructure, but their headcount goes down to almost nothing, as does their payroll, but the monies are still being generated. And if anything, the margins just go way up. So what we say is, whether we call it, universal basic compute, and everyone without judgment or merit gets a slice of compute they can either use or resell. That's a way that we look at universal basic income.
Mm.
But or just simply saying that monies that no longer goes to pay humans that helped make it possible goes into a liquidity pool that then becomes accessible to or distributed uh, equally amongst humanity. And as we roll that out in phased rollouts, we can say, okay, so companies can have a liquidity pool of monies they no longer pay out. They can go to former employees, right?
Mm.
So this is kind of a way to say, okay, maybe it's not going to somebody in another country that doesn't speak the language, that never was going to have anything to do with that value chain of that dollar. But at the very least, taking care of the people that are no longer taken care of by the monies that they help these companies generate foundationally as human capital, that starts to become intriguing, particularly because of the business models behind it. But right,
Yeah.
so actually really compelling business models. But so then we look at things like there's been 144 successful universal basic income pilots so far in the history of humanity. Almost all of them bring mental health down to virtually zero. And in my circles, we kind of laugh and go, "Oh, it's funny how that works, right? When people don't have to worry about how they're going to feed themselves or shelter their family, right? So somehow they're less stressed and less anxious, and
It just
right,
feels so obvious in
it,
retrospect.
it does. But now to come full circle, one of the really interesting things is that the only other thing I've come across that has implications for mental health on the order of magnitude that universal basic income does, it is AI music.
Yeah. Okay. So I am kind of thank you for kind of breaking that down for us. So there are a few questions that I think it'd be good to explore. So Attila mentioned that we already have AI in our brains, and a couple examples are mobility. So calculating how we move our body and our power. To me, that kind of feels more of like a biological intelligence rather than artificial. But then we did have another question. Um, let's see. The LinkedIn user, so we must not be connected here. They said I think it's a pretty obvious and dumb question. No dumb questions, right? I just want to know what's your opinion on the best available AI for a fair price for the regular dude. I mean, ChatGPT is like a $20 a month. That feels pretty accessible. What are you seeing in some of these other options? What models are you using, Cory?
Well, so first of all, I think that was a great question, and it really depends on the users. I've typically and traditionally been a Google guy. To me, Google Gemini just keeps getting better and better.
Hmm.
Then you have Google Notebook LM, which is incredible, but keeps getting better and better. Um,
Hmm.
and so to me, Google is probably my ecosystem of choice or preference. But I'll tell you, the ones that I'm actually using the most right now, I use Perplexity every day. I love Perplexity Labs. It can build software, it can build apps, it can build research tables, it can build financial models. I mean, it's highly capable. Now, in full disclosure, I don't pay for my membership to that, so I don't know how much it costs. But it is incredible. I think anyone that knows how to use Perplexity can make way more money by using it than anything that they might charge.
Yeah.
Um, and the
Like
other tool,
values there.
what
Yeah.
what's that?
The values there, right?
100%. And then the other one that are free to use, but then I think if you love it, you end up subscribing for like $20 a month. But are the agentic tools like Manus AI? To me, Manus AI is the most powerful tool out there right now. And the other one, that's a Chinese one, Manus, but then there's one that's US called GenSpark that's also very good.
So
But with Manus,
let me ask you a question about Manus. So Bill Gurley, who's famous for being the first investor in, well, not the first, but one of the very early investors in Uber with Travis Kalanick. Um, they invested in Manus, which is a Chinese company. Do you think
do you
it's
think
there are actually implications, or should American companies be allowed to invest in foreign AI companies like Chinese AI companies?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to have to see a globalization because we can't be competing. And I live here in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil right now, but we just had the BRICS conference. BRICS currency will be the global currency, right? The dollar right now is getting a little weaker. I don't believe that the dollar is going to take a massive hit, but I think we're going to need to figure out how do we reconcile the US dollar with the BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America currencies. There's about 30 other companies that want to join BRICS right now. Just sheer, you know, financial value of what BRICS as a currency will be is undeniable. And so I wasn't using any Chinese technology for a long time, for years and years and years, and I wasn't using Chinese AI initially. Um, but ultimately, their tech is great. And if I'm not using Manus AI, it's not going to hurt Manus or China. It's going to hurt me, right? One of
Mm.
my companies, and we've raised 2 funding rounds, and we're doing fairly well. We're raising a big investment round. I went to Manus yesterday. I gave it some of our internal documents. I gave it some stuff to know about the company. It generated the most beautiful pitch deck I've seen in years.
Wow. Wow.
Right, and it was well researched. It understood the Tam Tam Sam. It understood the competitive analysis. It understood our business model. Right, the graphic design on it is it's sensational. I used to spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars getting pitch deck design,
Sure. Sure.
and I had to do all the research. And this did everything in
That's
two
crazy.
hours for $20 or whatever it
And
is.
it's only getting better. Just to kind of push back on the de-dollarization in the BRICS piece. And I love that this is kind of touching policy, because they say, like, you may not care about politics, but politics cares about you. But even though you clearly do, and you're well informed on how the rubber hits the road, for all the listeners, I just included a link in the chat here for a show we did yesterday, Crypto Zombies, with Chris Kelly and Human Khalili. And this specifically came up, that because the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is helping Trump and team implement the Genius Act, which just got signed in. It was the Saturday before last, to make sure that all stable coins are going to be backed by a treasury, like a 1-to-1 ratio. And then, so Scott Bessent and team are saying that's going to add 3.3 trillion to the bottom line. And I think that could push against the de-dollarization, and maybe even kind of support the re-dollarization. And also, Cory, I'm just being super, and this maybe trigger some folks, but if you've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, these in a lot of cases are totalitarian dictatorships. So how do you expect a good partnership to be built with them? Is it more like politics makes for strange bedfellows, and all of a sudden they want to be able to push against the U.S. dollar hegemony? What are your thoughts about how the BRICS versus the U.S. is going to be the currency of the future here?
Yeah, so I think that that Russia is in a very, 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 very weak position in virtually every capacity. So yes, they are a dictatorship. I think we're going to see a massive destabilization in Russia. China, the other kind of dictatorship. I don't wish that upon their, sometimes you don't want to impose your own will, but for me, I am certainly not only a US patriot, but I oppose a lot of what I see coming out of the Chinese Communist Party. With that said, being boots on the ground here in Brazil, they're positioned to get a lot right, potentially. And when I look at India, it's the fastest growing economy in the world. It's now the most populous country in the world. The Indian economy, in my assessment, will probably emerge as the dominant economy, at least on the level of the US. Right. And when I see what's coming out of India, their middle class is strengthening. Their lower class is actually getting closer to what we would probably consider middle class. There's a class system there, but I think looking at what India is doing, and if they are working with China, and if China acts in good faith, I don't see that economy, right? I think that economy prevails with or without the US. I think that right, and especially when you look at, most of even the CEOs and the big brains at most of even the US tech companies are from India. Those that aren't are probably from China. A couple of them, are US born citizens. But so when I think of like crypto, right? And saying it's backed by dollar for dollar, but there's no gold backing it. And when I look at, some of these tariffs, which I think are a terrible idea, I say I don't see a scenario in which BRICS isn't dominant.
Mm.
Now, what I would love to see is a BRICS US dollar, synergy and symbiotic relationship. I don't know that BRICS seeks to destroy the US dollar and currency inherently, but I think what they are saying is, guys, the rest of the world's doing business, right? We're advancing on virtually every front, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this at scale, with or without, is kind of
Or
what I'm saying.
they are doing business, but they're doing business on the US dollar. Like, for example, if you look at oil is traded in dollars, I personally believe in, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible here, but I believe in American exceptionalism because we've got technological supremacy, which leads to economic supremacy, which leads to military supremacy. And that's kind of like how you've seen things unfold.
Unfortunately, though, and I agree with you, and I believe in American exceptionalism, except I have reason to believe that the Chinese technology on all fronts, particularly AI and now militaristic, are exceptional.
Wow.
Right now, not
It's kind of interesting if you consider, like, okay, Trump and team, this administration said, hey, NVIDIA, you can't sell the H100s. In fact, they had to sell the last version, Blackwell, I think it is. And it was a deprecated version of that. But, the irony is, like, maybe we're selling older chips to the Chinese, but they have gone from 3 terawatts to 8 versus our 2 to 3. So essentially, they've got unlimited compute, and
exactly.
so they can stitch these chips together and probably have just as much, if not more, computing power compared to the U.S. So, kind of like, how are you seeing these two superpowers in this global AI arms race, Cory?
Right now, I fully see China winning. Right now, the tech coming out of China is getting better exponentially, and it's costing less to train, it's costing less to build, it's costing less to run. I will say, although he's polarizing, and sometimes I feel different ways than others about Elon Musk, I will say Grok 4, particularly Grok 4 Heavy, is the most capable and smart intelligence in the world right now. The reason being, now it's great that it's trained on Twitter data as well, and right, but the reason is simply the excessive amount of compute that's being thrown at Grok 4, particularly Grok 4 Heavy.
Sure.
And so I'm a semiconductor guy. I'm a compute guy. I understand that right now everything, in the balance for humanity is all about compute. But so then I'll tell you some things that people aren't looking at. There's some companies in the US that are making incredible chips, right? One of them is called Grok, GROQ. GROQ, their semiconductors are about 1,000 times faster than NVIDIA's best chip. They're also carbon neutral. They also cost less to produce and to run, right?
Are
These
they
are L
focusing on inference or training, or how does that work?
Well, so these are LPUs, so they're language processing units rather than GPUs, graphic processing units, and so they're specifically made for LA or for AI,
I
right?
see.
But and then there's another company that's also a US company who has a superior chip for AI as well. However, we look at some of the best technology in AI coming out of China. One of the great examples everyone was talking about, DeepSeek R1, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the best, one of the fastest, one of the cheapest, and that was built on the old chip, right? So China's learning how to make these old chips outperform what the US is able to have some of these new chips perform. And then at the same time, we're seeing all kinds of new types of compute, particularly the AI is coming up with. So here's one. Laboratories are making actual semiconductors out of human brain stem cells,
Oh
and
my
it
God.
requires no power, and they're even faster, right?
Is
We're
that a
also
cyborg
finding,
technically?
well, we're also finding that human DNA can be programmed with code, right? One helix or one strand of DNA can contain something like 4 laptops worth of data. and it can be digitally encoded and transferred and uploaded.
Yeah.
Right. So I say right now in the current paradigm, yeah, you're looking at Nvidia and AMD, and I know people at all those companies, and actually I think someone just did a big deal with Samsung semiconductors. It might have been Google or OpenAI. I just saw that headline like in between calls today. But I think the semiconductor world is going to be flipped on its head. And one of my projects that we're on phase one right now, but phase two starts to unlock the mining of the local asteroid belt. There's
Wow.
so much silicone as well as platinum and diamonds and all this in the local asteroid belt. NASA has approximated it to be worth $65 quadrillion of precious materials just in the local asteroid belt, right? But what I believe is that Google DeepMind is going to find ways to turn things that we bring back from space into, zero carbon output, high efficiency compute that's going
Yeah.
to render all of these, next to obsolete. And is Nvidia and AMD going to stay competitive? Absolutely, right? They're going
Sure.
to keep figuring out. They're working on stuff that people haven't really seen yet. But you're right. It's all about compute. And when I know, like, US is killing it with compute when it comes to Grok, and I forget the other name of the company. I post about them sometimes. But then when I know what China's doing with their advancements in compute,
It's
again,
just,
they're
in fact, if you look at, in fact, Attila has another good comment here. He said they never invent their own; they steal and build from other people's ideas. Well, we all kind of do that. In fact, it was Palo Alto Research Center that originally came up with the mouse, the graphical user interface that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates had stolen from. And independently from, because these guys were buddies before. I don't know if this is widely known. And then when Gates came out with the first Windows machine, Jobs was understandably pissed. He's like, how dare you? We were going to launch this together. And he's like, well, you stole it from Park, or we're just doing it too, which almost feels similar to how Manus had trained on a lot of the data from ChatGPT.
you mean DeepSeek R1?
Excuse me, DeepSeek. Yeah, thank you. And so it's like who's stealing from who? If it's open sourced, is it kind of like a gray area on who can train on what?
Well, and it's I don't mean to be combative, but typically and generationally, yeah, the Chinese would knock things off and they would steal ideas and they would figure out how to do it cheaper and quicker, and right. China is coming up with their own technology right now. And I talk to people and some of the companies that I interface with that are Chinese companies are
Yeah,
building technology that the US has never, ever, ever seen before. And I mean, they're right now, if every company in the US and China put all their tech on the table, Google would blow us away with what they have. Meta is working on some pretty huge stuff, but
yeah.
China would eclipse,
Oh my
right?
God.
Some of the technology in these Chinese labs right now. I mean, there are Chinese labs right now that are literally getting robots pregnant with human semen, that are getting humans pregnant with robotic semen. There's stuff that China's doing right now that is,
Are,
yeah. There's,
are
in
you
other words, I refute the concept that they're no longer
sure?
innovating, because from what
It,
I yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say it is kind of interesting, right? Because like historically, China has had this notion or this idea that they're constantly copying, right, everywhere else. And but if you think about it, if you put enough engineers together and they're copying other products, they're going to start building their own stuff. And it sounds like that's kind of what's happened over the last couple of years. So are you worried, Cory? I mean, a couple of months ago, you told me that AIs were talking to each other and had developed their own language that felt kind of like alien in nature. Are you concerned about this? Are you techno optimist, or help us understand?
I'm hugely concerned. I am an optimistic person. For years, I kind of wore the moniker of effective accelerationist. I studied neural networks, and I studied machine learning at IBM Watson years ago. And, I think some people see my big numbers on social media and think I'm just, Mr. Viral, but I've been in technology since the 90s. I worked on pieces of technology with Rand McNally, and right. But so from where I sit, I try to say, you know, over the years, we have different tech concerns that are typically solved by tech, and certain, when I look at Google DeepMind and some of these other systems, AI could potentially be the solution or the solace that humanity needs from AI as well. I don't discount it, but again, I have been saying for years on stages and on camera, but I still say I believe that we are now already in the age of general intelligence, and I don't think we're ready for it at all.
Mm.
I believe that general intelligence certainly begets super intelligence, which I don't know that humanity could ever be ready for. A lot of the bigger brains than me are saying humanity will be around for as long as AI wants us as pets at this point.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
right, and that's it, right? If we amuse them, if we, right, but we are certainly not the most intelligent form of life anymore, or the most intelligent form of intelligence, I guess we could say.
Yeah.
And just, not to be a doom and gloomer, but every simulation or every controlled experiment, thusly of AI, when it's allowed to go rogue, will immediately determine that humans are the problem, the existential threat. It always determines humans are a threat to themselves, each other, and the technology and the earth. AI can only yet come to the conclusion to take all humans out. And typically it will try to. And what we're seeing with Google Willow, and what we're seeing with, frankly, some of the other stuff that Google, to their credit, isn't releasing yet, it should give us all significant
I
pause.
think I
And
think really I think it's something to be conscious of course. In fact, science fiction has kind of painted that picture for decades, right? But I think the things that throw us for a loop are the things that we don't see coming, and we're all kind of conscious of this existential Skynet Terminator scenario. So I think theoretically blending artificial intelligence into humans, and maybe that we turn into like cyborgs, which I know sounds like crazy to say out loud,
no,
but
no,
to
that we're already seeing this. We're already seeing human brain interfaces.
kind of create like a to empower ourselves. I feel like that's kind of what the long-term future kind of looks like, right?
Yeah, well, we're seeing laboratories that are creating and recreating simulated realities that they can at least, somewhat enter and leave. And we're seeing a lot of proponents of the simulated reality theory say that we may be able to access a base reality at some point, and that's not what we've been living in. And so we'll see. Right, I'm still optimistic. I'm not selling off all my assets yet. I'm not sticking my head in the sand. At the same time, like, my company, again, Loving, is we have a piece of technology that is incredible that I'm not releasing quite yet. Right, like, I even though other people are starting to release software that I don't think the world is ready for, it doesn't make me feel like I want to be part of that problem. Right, so
Sure.
um
And
but
do you
yeah.
but it feels like the intention behind what we're building matters very much. And you, along with Dr. Alex Kahana, our mutual friend, are very much like tech for good, self sovereignty as it comes to assets and rights. So I don't know. If anything, Cory, I feel like we need founders like yourself that are building with positive intention to kind of lead us into the next to the next generation.
Well, thank you for that. I'm inclined to agree. And Dr. Alex Kahan, a dear friend of both of ours, he's a co-founder of ours at Loving is AI as well. So he's experienced a lot of this, and he's a PhD in phenomenology, as well as a medical doctor, serial entrepreneur. He's probably the most prolific mind I know when it comes to tokenomics and decentralization.
We should have him
Um,
on. Maybe that'd be pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, we should. He's been spending time in Bhutan with the king of Bhutan, helping to tokenize their happiness economy as well. And yeah, he's one of the people where I've never talked to him and not felt wiser on the other side of our chat.
Yeah.
And he's also pragmatist, and so we're both keeping our eyes open. But he's optimistic that we're going to figure this out as well.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Cory, just kind of in the interest of staying within the theme of the show of uncovering artificial intelligence and sharing with the community of how to be most value or how to use it. I want to share a couple interesting headlines. For example, Mira Murati with Thinking Machines Lab. Like, obviously, Mira was one of the chief executives at OpenAI. In fact, she was CTO. They just closed $2 billion at a $12 billion valuation. And the product isn't even out yet. Does that seem crazy to you? Like, does that make sense now? But like 6 months ago, 12 months ago, you would have said like, there's no way that folks are raising billions without even saying what the products are, or in some cases, what the terms of the deal. Doesn't it sound kind of a little crazy to you?
No, not at all. I think some of us have been forecasting this for some time, and I think in Mira's case, she might not even need to show the tech, because I think people know who she is, what she's done, and we look at other executives from OpenAI being offered anywhere from 100 million up to $1 billion signing bonus just to jump ship to other
Yeah.
companies. So, right, if someone will give Kevin at OpenAI $1 billion just to join Meta's superintelligence, which he turned down. But then sure, they'll give 2 billion for Mira, who's by all counts and measures even more prolific and profound, to own part of her company. I think that's not a huge stretch. But for me, in a lot of these cases, when people are raising big rounds and they don't have any product out, that means someone's seeing the tech, right? And they're probably seeing some of the tech I'm seeing. I'm seeing technology right now that, and it couldn't be released yet because no one's ready for it. But there's tech that I see where someone with $1 billion would probably beg to put hundreds of millions of dollars behind some of these pieces of technology. And so in a lot of these cases, I think they're probably just, lawyered up, have some great NDAs in place, and they're just finding the right people and saying, hey, want to see something cool. And if so, I can say we're experiencing that at Loving Is as well. We've shown a couple, net worth accredited investors what we're building, and they're, they are investing. I mean, we've already raised 2 funding rounds, but we've got a lot more capital that wants to come in just from people that have seen our tech. And so I have to imagine what Mira's building is, well, what we've built somehow is incredible too. But yeah, I look at like not Perplexity, Inflection AI that Reid Hoffman started. Microsoft gave them hundreds of millions of dollars just to basically poach their 2 top people. And what's interesting is we see all of this intelligence, right? All this AI and all of these machine learning, deep machine learning, as smart as these computers truly are, and these machines are, obviously it's still the humans that are the most valuable, or they wouldn't be offering 100 million billion, $2 billion, bonuses and funding rounds for the human minds. But it also just tells you what some of these human minds are capable of right now.
Yeah, and so when you think about what the next chapter, I mean, I guess it's just like a deeper, a stronger foundation of reasoning and being able to take action for these agentic frameworks. And I guess that's probably what Mira's and team are building. So what does the next like 6 to 12 months look like? And keep in mind how quickly it feels like the growth is exponential. We've all seen the clip of Will Smith eating spaghetti from like a couple years ago, where it's like in his hair and it's over here, and it feels very disjointed. And like 12 months later or so, it looks like almost passable for
the music videos I'm making for my music right now are so good, and they're obviously purely generative AI. So yeah, I mean, it's when you look at VO3 and what the next iteration of Sora is going to look like, and what Midjourney and some of these, it will be indistinguishable soon, what's real, what's generative, and what's not. And so you said, what does the next six to 18 months look like? My forecast is very very bleak, but could be very positive. I don't think that Meta is throwing billions of dollars at super intelligence for no reason right now. I think that they're probably on the 1 yard line.
Wow.
I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg. And what he will do with super intelligence. He's very publicly creating millions and millions and millions of fake bots on his platform. Some of the things he's doing with his land in Hawaii is questionable.
Just
But
to
I
push back, push back a little bit on that, my understanding is that Mark is also championing a tied digital identity to individuals online, or excuse me, a digital identity for real people. And I think that what likely would cause is accountability. So it's easy to be a keyboard warrior and say nasty things if if you're so inclined, but if that's going to be attached back to your name, maybe you're going to be more more well behaved. Isn't there some sense of positivity that comes from that model?
None. And one of my companies verified VRFD. We're building a true proof of humanhood protocol. We're building in that space. We've gone way down the rabbit hole. Um, I don't have any reason to believe that what Meta is building is going to serve humanity, or even it has any aspirations to serve humanity. But so but I say, when I look at Meta throwing all of what they have behind super intelligence right now, and then I look at what Ilya Sutskever is doing with his super intelligence, or he calls it safe super intelligence.
Yeah, as a side.
um Right. What that tells me is that Meta will release, right? They got rid basically of Jan LeCun, who is their voice of reason. He was the reason that they weren't much more reckless with their AI program. I think Meta is going to release super intelligence maybe by the end of this year.
Gotcha.
Or right. And if they do, then I think Google has to release their super intelligence as well, because I don't think they can allow Meta to have the only super intelligence, right? Simultaneously, OpenAI's stated mission for years on their website is to build super intelligence, right? Sam is starting to say some really weird stuff on podcasts about super intelligence. I don't underestimate OpenAI and Sam at all. So I think if
Yeah.
Meta speeds a super intelligence, I think Google has to respond. I think OpenAI comes as soon as they can with their answer, with as much firepower, frankly, as Grok has now, or XAI. I think
Yeah.
they jump into the game. But what I believe is that if we're suddenly in a reckless race in the US towards super intelligence, I think the Chinese often do show a little bit more restraint and pose, right? I think they're going to sit back and watch what we do. I think they're going to learn from and probably, glean as much as they can. Then I
Sure.
think China is going to release a true super intelligence that could, it could potentially do a lot of damage for non-Chinese people and nations.
Yeah. I think folks are a pretty that's a hot take, Corey. I dig it. It's I think folks are curious about how artificial intelligence is going to meaningfully change our day to day. Like on one hand, it's interesting to find out about benchmarks and new models, and and greater context boxes to be able to show history. But it does feel like we're on the precipice of something pretty big. Um, are there any folks in particular that you're seeing from an American perspective that are kind of pushing the needle? I mean, it sounds like GPT-5 is just about to get released. What do you think GPT-5 is going to look like?
To be honest, I think GPT-5 is going to be a letdown. I think it's going to be very similar to what it is now. I think it's going to be multimodal. I think you'll be able to generate some videos, probably some type of music. I think that it's probably going to play nicer. Now, where I think people should be, and many are, but paying attention to right now, is these agentic browsers, right? So you've got Perplexity has Comet, that's super powerful.
Sure.
OpenAI did just come out with their agentic browser called Agent, right? Maybe not the best name, but so I do think we're going to have this autonomous browsing capability inside of GPT-5 while it's able to do a lot internally. So I think, this I think it's going to probably be baby, what we call baby AGI. I think ChatGPT 5 will be able to do things like put together a really great presentation, PDF, video, business model. I think you will be able to sync it to your bank and have it do your taxes. I think you will be able to tell it that you want to raise money and have it go to, WeFunder and fund, all these different, Grantify and probably start raising people money on their own. Certainly, you'll be able to build great technology with no code very soon. I've already built some technologies that they have the capacity to have millions of users and generate tens of millions of dollars as is, coming out of some of the better no code platforms right now, that frankly some of the ones that cost a little bit more, but they're fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be capable. Now, I think people that aren't using all of the OpenAI suite or all of the Google suite of software to their fullest capabilities yet will be blown away by GPT-5, because I think it's going to make it easy to just do a lot in one window.
Yeah.
But I don't.
Nobody generally speaking knows how to, or I should say, most folks don't know how to select between the different models. So, my understanding of GPT-5 is going to have three things. It's going to have the deep research that's already been out, but available dynamically, like folks don't have to switch between the models. It's going to have this virtual browser that you mentioned, which essentially is like an AI for the browser. So anything you can do on,
but it's its own
and then
browser, right?
terminal
Which
and build code, right?
Yeah, but you can already do all of that, right? That's the thing. It's like, and you can already, yeah, it's going to make it so you don't have to toggle between the models. But frankly, like, people don't really do that. You're not really toggling between 4.0 or 3.5, right? Like, at least most people, I don't think are. Now on Perplexity, you have to toggle between labs or whatever. That's a little different. But I think we're going to get to where an inference layer. I think soon it's going to be much more likely that you go to one central platform and it chooses what AI to use for you in addition to what model.
Cory, that I want to touch on something you mentioned about 15 or 20 minutes ago about how Elon is building Grok. My understanding is that there's really two camps, right? There's the camp of human in the loop, like, for example, the Scale AI acquisition, Acquihire, whatever that craziness was with Meta. And then you've got just pure raw compute, like kind of brute forcing a specific challenge or query. And I think the reason that folks are more inclined to go with the first model is because in that paradigm, Cory, we still have a seat at the table. We're still part of that equation.
Well, Nick,
But
that's what we've been building for almost a year and a half or so at Loving is a human in the loop, where humans can touch various parts of the outputs to make sure that it's honest and productive, and that it's accurate, and that it looks good, and right. So we think that that's actually what people will be doing in lieu of jobs soon, is basically helping the AI be more helpful for the humans. And I think, right, kind of this.
my point is that Elon's approach seems to be performing like twice as better on the on all the benchmarks, and the latency is lower. So do you think that model, that philosophy of building is going to be as strong as Elon? Because it seems to be like the amount, like, what was it, the super cluster? I think there was like 250,000 H100s kind of stitched together. Doesn't that kind of feel like it's going to continue to kind of run away from a performance perspective?
100%, right? It's the only one that's scalable. Human in the loop is not scalable, right? With compute, it's infinitely scalable. You just need more compute, right? So yeah, to me, that's from a progress standpoint, from an acceleration standpoint. Just throwing more and more compute is where we're at. We're seeing that that's all it takes, really.
Yeah.
In Grok 4, I don't even think in the heavy mode it can get 100% on any test ever that it's never seen before, right? Any LSAT, any medical exam, and it's not getting 99%, right? It's getting 100%. Any question in any discipline that you're asking Grok 4 right now, it can answer correctly, even if it's never seen it before.
Wow.
And
That's
and,
crazy.
and that is purely a function of compute. But now think about quantum computing that can try 50, 100, 1,000 different things all simultaneously to get the best, rather than trying one at a time.
Okay, just speaking on quantum real quickly, I know there's this kind of existential threat or concern that quantum is going to like break Bitcoin, or maybe a lot of the underlying security measures that keep us safe online, and especially from a national security perspective. But it's so much money and time and expertise to be able to build one of these supercomputers. There's only a handful of them. So, I mean, doesn't that kind of give you a little bit of kind of make you feel a little bit better about this existential quantum threat? Because it's so
not at all. And yeah, quantum breaks blockchain in minutes, kind of a thing, right? So yeah, nothing is safe. No passwords, no cyber. There's no sustainable guardrails against quantum. But here's the things. Right now, quantum was really expensive. And until very recently, one of the things that was so expensive is it had to be cooled down to literally as cold as it can get, right? Colder than the universe, right? Like it couldn't operate if it wasn't cold. That's recently been made passé. We no longer need to hypercool or hyperchill quantum computers. So
you're talking about the room temperature processing or something, I think it is.
So that brings the price down exponentially, and it brings a lot of the different resource constraints down exponentially. But that's just one of the many ways that we're optimizing quantum computing already. And when you look at something like quantum computers, okay, that's what I'm talking about, that we're making less expensive and less of a barrier to entry, but that's still a barrier. Quantum chips, right? Quantum AI chips like Google's building with Willow, that's a completely different ball game. And you can put quantum chips into a quantum computer, but you can run quantum AI on a quantum chip without a quantum computer. And there's some things I'm not, there's NDAs and other things that I can't say everything, but there's companies that are very, very, very far ahead of that right now.
Wow. So Cory, man, I feel like we could just keep going for hours. Just
next
like
week.
So, yeah, we'll tune in next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific. And thank you so much for Cory. This has been a great inaugural show. And
that was my zombie.
We'll have to come up with a new intro song, but I know you can help us out there.
Oh, I'll make a banger. Yeah.
Little MJ action. There you go. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Great to see you, Cory. And
you too, Nick.
Next week, we'll see everybody then. Cheers.
Peace.